One man owned 90% of every drop of oil in America. The government smashed his company into pieces to stop him, and here is the punchline. He walked away richer than before, voila. The world's first billionaire wasn't just lucky, he was engineered. By a childhood most people wouldn't survive. Meet John D. Rockefeller. The 8th of July, 1839, Richford, New York. A baby is born into a house with no money, no future, and two parents pulling in opposite directions. His mother, Eliza, is a devout Baptist. She prays, she scrubs, she believes in honesty and hard labor, and God watching the ledger. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, believes in exactly none of that. The neighbors call him Devil Bill. The nickname is generous. Here is what Devil Bill actually did for a living. He sold tinted water to dying people and called it a cancer cure. He pretended to be a deaf, mute beggar, so farmers would spill their secrets in front of him. Then he'd come back, weeks later, and use those secrets to drain their savings. Not ideal. He didn't just want their cash. He wanted to watch them lose everything. And he ran the same game on his own kids. His own words, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make them sharp." So picture this, little John, maybe 4 years old, sitting on a tall chair. Devil Bill holds out his arms. "Jump, son, I'll catch you." John jumps, Devil Bill steps back. The kid hits the floor. Then comes the lesson. Never trust anyone completely, not even me. That was the curriculum. Trust is a tax. The world is a market. You're either the buyer or the inventory. By 1849, Devil Bill takes his philosophy to its natural conclusion. He is accused of sexual assault. The walls close in, so he vanishes. New name, Dr. William Livingston. New wife, while still legally married to Eliza. New life. 50 years of bigamy. In plain sight, he leaves his real family broke. John never forgets. Not the abandonment, not the interest rate. Enter the working life. At 16, John is the man of the house. Quiet, intense, allergic to nonsense. He pays for a 3-month bookkeeping course because numbers, unlike his father, don't lie. He lands an assistant bookkeeper job at 50 cents a day. Read that again. 50 cents a day. And here is where most people at that wage spend it on Friday and forget by Sunday. John writes down every single penny in a tiny red notebook. He names Ledger A. Every coffee, every streetcar, every coin in the church plate. Tracked. By 20, through pure boring austerity, he has $800 saved. In 1859 money, that is roughly 30 grand today. Built on a wage that wouldn't buy lunch. But 800 isn't enough to enter real business. He needs 1,000. So he does the one thing that must have burned a hole in his chest. He asks Devil Bill, and Devil Bill, true to brand, says yes, on terms. 10% interest, callable on demand, meaning Daddy could yank the loan back any morning he felt like it, and bankrupt his own son before breakfast. That is the opening hand. A boy raised to expect betrayal, holding a predatory loan from his own father, with a red notebook and a 50-cent salary, about to build the largest private fortune the planet had ever seen. Here is the question I want you to sit with. If your starting capital was $1,000 at 10%, from someone who already proved they'd drop you on the floor, would you take the deal? Drop your honest answer in the comments. Yes, no, or I'd burn the ledger. I'm reading every reply. 1859. Pennsylvania. A drill hits oil and the entire economy of light flips overnight. Voila! Cleveland turns into Refinery Row, and a 20-year-old bookkeeper named John D. Rockefeller, is staring at the chaos, like it is a spreadsheet waiting to be solved. His partner Maurice Clark wants none of it. John, people always need to eat. Beans, pork, oats, stay safe. John's reply is colder than the Ohio winter. People will always need to see in the dark. Oil is the light. Not a debate, a thesis. So they pull in a chemist, Samuel Andrews, and build a refinery. And here is the mechanic most people miss. Refining in 1860 was almost comically wasteful. Operators wanted kerosene. That was it. Everything else, gasoline, naphtha tar, got dumped straight into the Cuyahoga River. Free product poured into the water every single day. Rockefeller looks at that river and does the math out loud. That is not waste. That is margin somebody forgot to pick up. But first, the partnership has to break. Clark is terrified of debt. John wants to borrow aggressive, expand fast, swallow the market. By 1865, they can even share an office without sparks. So they agree on the most ruthless exit clause in business history. Private auction. Highest bid takes the whole refinery. Bidding opens at $2,000. 3, 5, 10. Clark's face goes white. He is looking at a 25-year-old kid, and assuming the kid will blink, he goes nuclear. 50,000. The room freezes. Clark is reaching for his coat. He has already won. In his head, he has already won. Then John, flat as a ledger line, 72,500. The smirk dies on Clark's face. He realizes right there that this kid will bid until he is bankrupt or buried. Hands up. It is yours. Rockefeller shakes his hand, walks out, and years later calls it the day that decided his entire career. Not ideal, if you were Clark. Now watch the mechanic snap into place. He renames the company Rockefeller and Andrews, and starts running oil the way he ran an accounting book. Every line item scrubbed. The waste in the river. Andrews engineers it into lubricating oil and paraffin wax. New revenue stream, built out of literal trash. Then John pushes further. He buys his own forests, builds his own kilns to dry the wood, hammers his own barrels. Every middleman between him and the customer gets surgically removed. Here is how it actually works. First, kill the waste, and the waste pays you back. Second, own the supply chain, and your costs collapse. Third, undercut every rival on price, while still booking a fatter profit than they ever could. It is vertical integration before the term was even fashionable. And it is a quiet massacre. By 30, the bookkeeper from Cleveland owns the biggest refinery in the oil capital of the world. Most men cash out at this point. Buy a big house, sit on the porch. John walks up to the smoky skyline, looks across at hundreds of tiny rival refineries clawing for scraps, and doesn't see competitors. He sees inventory. He sees a fragmented market begging to be consolidated. See what happened? The ledger never closed. It just got bigger. So here is the question for you. If you were standing in that auction room at 25, with everything you owned on the line, would you have bid the 72,000 or walked? Drop your answer below and tell me the highest bet you have ever made on yourself. The 10th of January, 1870, Cleveland, Ohio. A 30-year-old bookkeeper signs a piece of paper and quietly lights the fuse on the most ruthless monopoly America will ever build. His name is John D. Rockefeller. The paper is the incorporation of the Standard Oil Company, and his pitch to the room is almost biblical. The industry is broken. I will take these shattered pieces and forge them into one, and I will be the one. Voila! The machine is born. Here is what most people get wrong. Rockefeller did not chase oil wells. He did not drill. He did not gamble on geology. He looked straight at the bloodstream of the country, the railroads, and saw something everybody else missed. Rates were collapsing. Train operators were knifing each other to steal freight. The whole sector was bleeding out. Rockefeller smelled the blood. Then he walked in. Picture the scene. A young refiner sits down across from the railroad kings and slides one number across the table. 60 carloads of oil. Every single day. Rain, snow, panic, recession. Doesn't matter. 60. That was more barrels than the entire rest of the valley combined. The railroad men nearly choked on their cigars. And what do you want for that, Mr. Rockefeller? His answer was 4 words. A secret partnership. Enter the South Improvement Company. Sick. On paper, a forgettable shell. In reality, a cartel stitched together between the biggest refiners and the railroads. And it ran on 3 ice-cold mechanics. First, the rebate. Standard Oil paid the public freight rate, then quietly got a fat discount, kicked back on every barrel it shipped, cheaper than anyone, by a mile. Second, the intelligence feed. The railroads handed Rockefeller detailed dossiers on his competitors, where their oil was going, which buyers were taking it, what price was on the invoice. He was reading their mail before they sealed the envelope. Third, the kill shot, the drawback. Every time a rival refiner shipped a barrel, the railroad skimmed a cut of that rival's money and slid it across the table to Rockefeller. So competitors were not just losing to him. They were literally funding his war chest with every shipment they made. Not ideal. Was it brutal? Yes. Was it legal in 1872? Also yes. Here is how the endgame actually worked. Rockefeller would invite a small refinery owner up to 26 Broadway, 6th floor, calm as a deacon. Tea on the table, numbers on a sheet of paper, then the speech. Friend, look at the rates. I am being paid on every barrel you ship. If you stay in this game, you will go bankrupt. Sell to me today, in Standard Oil stock or in cash, or you will be crushed. Your choice. Most folded on the spot. One man didn't. He told Rockefeller no. So Rockefeller stood up, crossed the room, and pushed the window open wide. 6 stories of Manhattan. Air rushing in. Bill, he said, come look at this view. Beautiful, isn't it? See what happened. It is a loop. Cheaper rates, sharper intel, rivals paying his bills, and a 6th floor window for anyone who said no. Quick question for you before the next chapter. If Rockefeller knocked on your door tomorrow with stock in one hand and a buyout check in the other, would you sell or would you fight? Drop your answer in the comments. 6 seconds, that is all it takes for a man to fall out a Cleveland window and become tomorrow's obituary. Wind howling, footsteps nervous. The math of gravity, indifferent. Speaking of names you don't want floating around in public databases. It is the IRS. Just kidding, it is data brokers. Right now, thousands of them are quietly trading your full name, your email, your home address, your phone number, even your relatives' names. And you never signed a thing. This isn't spam. This is the loaded gun. Scammers stitching phishing attacks out of your real details. Criminals opening credit lines in your name. Strangers occasionally knocking on your actual door. Not ideal. That is why I set up Incogni. They contact dozens of data brokers, demand removal, and absorb the legal pushback so you don't have to. The custom removal feature on the unlimited and family plans lets you point at any people search site where your info shows up, and a real privacy agent goes in and scrubs it manually. I've watched my exposure shrink week by week in real time. Voila! Identity theft. Victims spend months, sometimes years, rebuilding their credit and their name. Damage that didn't have to happen. Head to Incogni. Come Crayon Capital. Use code Crayon Capital, and you get 60% off. They can't hurt you if they can't find you. Link in the description. Now, back to Cleveland, where the obituaries were piling up, the financial kind. February into March, 1872, 48 hours. 6 refineries swallowed, one by one, door by door, like a python working through a henhouse. 3 months later, 22 of the 26 refineries in Cleveland had folded, surrendered, sold, erased. They called it the Cleveland Massacre. And the name was not a metaphor. Then someone leaked the secret, and the public lost its mind. Late March, the oil regions went ballistic. They burned Rockefeller in effigy on courthouse lawns. They marched with torches, screaming about the anaconda, squeezing the country dry. The pressure climbed so high, the Pennsylvania legislature ripped up the South Improvement Company charter. Within months, newspapers cheered, crowds cheered. They thought they had killed the monster. They had not. Here is what they missed. Rockefeller didn't need the South Improvement Company anymore. By the time the politicians staged their funeral for the deal, he already owned Cleveland, the refineries, the crude flowing into them, the bookkeeping, the pricing, the rail cars carrying the kerosene. Out. Game already over. Trophy already collected. And Cleveland. Cleveland was the warm-up. He pulled out a map of America and started reading it the way a general reads a battlefield. Refineries in Pittsburgh. Refineries in Philadelphia. Refineries in New York. Each one, a town to take, a supply line to choke, a competitor to digest. What he built next is the blueprint every monopoly since has copied. The textbook word for it is vertical integration, owning every step from raw input to final shelf. The street version is simpler. If a rival in another state refused to sell, Rockefeller didn't fight him in the market. He cut off the man's oxygen. First, he bought the companies that made the white oak barrels. The oil shipped in, no barrels, no shipments. Second, he started squeezing the railroads, the only veins kerosene could travel through. Third, he reached for the timber, the iron hoops, the glue, the wagons, every nail in the supply chain, slowly migrating onto his ledger. See what happened? It is a loop. Own the input, starve the rival. Buy the rival cheap, repeat. A money machine that ate competitors as fuel. Quick question before the next move. If you were standing in that office in 1872, holding that map of America, would you have pulled the same play? Or would you have walked away from it? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one. By 1879, the kid who started as a bookkeeper controlled 90% of an entire industry. 90%. Let that number sit on your tongue for a second, because it is about to get personal for anyone who has ever stared at a paycheck and wondered where the leverage actually lives. Here is what happened. Rockefeller didn't just buy refineries. He bought the warehouses that stored the oil. He bought the chemical plants that cooked the acid used to clean the oil. He bought the cooperatives that made the wooden barrels. So picture a competitor in 1878. He has got crude. He has got a refinery. He is ready to ship. He goes to buy a barrel. There are no barrels. He goes to buy acid. There is no acid. Voila, game over before lunch. But there was one last door. The independent pipeline. Pennsylvania oilmen, broken and furious, scraped together capital to build a 110-mile steel artery straight to the Atlantic coast, designed to skip Rockefeller's railroads entirely. An engineering moonshot meant to crack Standard Oil's spine. Rockefeller's response: scorched earth. He bought thin strips of land directly across the pipeline's path and buried the project in trespassing lawsuits. When the lawyers slowed down, his men sped up. Enter the pipe wars. crews sabotaging lines in the dark, local officials suddenly, mysteriously, pulling permits, not ideal. By the time the pipeline finally limped to completion, the independents were bankrupt, exhausted, done. Rockefeller strolled in and bought the whole thing for pennies on the dollar. See what happened. It is a loop. One by one, the dominoes tipped. From Cleveland to the Atlantic, the independent oilmen went the way of the dodo. Kids watched their fathers come home hollow. The bookkeeper finished his map. 90% of the planet's oil sat under one signature. But here is the reverse. On a fortune that big, when you own 90% of the world starts aiming at you. And by 1882, the target on his back was getting painted bright red. So he had a new problem. American law back then was almost quaint. A company chartered in Ohio was not allowed to own stock in a company chartered in Pennsylvania. Full stop. Which meant Rockefeller's empire was technically a pile of separate firms, held together by secret handshakes and gentlemen's agreements, fragile, one subpoena from cracking open. So his lawyers built something the world had literally never seen. A ghost that could own everything and answer to no one. The 2nd of January, 1882, Rockefeller and 8 associates signed a private document that pulled the stock of 40 companies into one giant entity, governed by 9 trustees. They called it, plainly, the trust. A legal shell game. Ask a regulator who owned that refinery in Buffalo, and the paper trail walked you in circles until you gave up. One reporter later put it perfectly. You could argue its existence from its effects, but you could not prove it. That single sentence is the entire blueprint of modern wealth concealment, and it was invented in a room in 1882. From 26 Broadway in Manhattan, a building people quietly called the Temple, Rockefeller stopped refining oil and started optimizing the planet. He took the same ledger obsession that ran his teenage budget and scaled it across continents. He once ordered a plant to stop using 40 drops of solder to seal a kerosene can and use 39. 39, one drop multiplied by millions of cans, was a fortune. That is the part most people miss when they look at their own bills. Pennies are not pennies at scale. Pennies are the entire game. Now, hit me in the comments. If you owned 90% of your industry tomorrow, would you build a trust to hide it, or would you sell it all and walk away clean? Pick one and tell me why. Picture this. One drop of solder, that is it. One single drop, shaved off every kerosene tin, because 40 drops cracked under heat, and 38 leaked oil onto the docks. 39. Voila, multiply that microscopic decision across millions of tins, shipped across millions of miles, and you've just stumbled onto the math that built the richest man in human history. This was the standard way. Obsession dressed up as efficiency. And here is the part most people miss. Rockefeller wasn't just chasing the American wallet. He looked at a globe and saw something nobody else saw. America had the oil, the rest of the world had the dark. So he moved iconic blue 5-gallon tins flooded Asian ports. In China, he handed out millions of tiny kerosene lamps for free. Read that again, free. Because if you give a man a lamp, congratulations, you now own his nights. Every flicker after sunset, every page read, every dinner served. That is a recurring subscription paid in oil for life. And the price tag? He crushed kerosene from 30 cents a gallon down to 8. For the first time in human history, a poor farmer could afford to stay awake. After the sun went down, civilization got longer days. Rockefeller got the bill. By the 1890s, the bookkeeper from Cleveland was sitting on more than $900 million, roughly 1.5% of the entire American economy. One man, 1.5%, let that land. But here is where the ledger turns ugly. The numbers were the only thing still growing. The man behind them was rotting in real time. Enter alopecia. His hair fell out in clumps, scalp, eyebrows, eyelashes gone. He turned into a pale, hairless figure who rotated through a closet of wigs at different lengths, just to fake the look of natural growth. Not ideal. His nerves shredded his stomach. He survived on crackers and milk. The richest digestive system in America couldn't handle a sandwich. And while the king was hiding inside his temple of wigs and crackers, a new kind of enemy was sharpening her pen. 1902, McClure. S. Magazine, a woman named Ida Tarbell. Journalist, survivor, and crucially, daughter of a Pennsylvania oilman that Standard Oil had personally crushed years earlier. She had watched the anaconda squeeze her father's business until there was nothing left. Now she had a typewriter, a deadline, and a very long memory. For 2 years she hunted. Not wrote, hunted. She tracked down employees the machine had spit out. She dug secret contracts out of railroad basements. She mapped the rebates, the drawbacks, the spy networks, the silent handshakes that built the empire one kickback at a time. And then the investigation cracked open. Something even Rockefeller couldn't bury. Devil Bill. The headline detonated. America learned that John D., the soft-spoken deacon, who quoted scripture before breakfast, was the son of a wanted criminal, a bigamist, a con man living a double life, under a fake name in another state. Right now, while the son ran the world's biggest company, the mask of the deacon got ripped clean off. And for the first time in his life, the man who controlled the price of light couldn't control the story. No comment, no move. Just silence behind a wig, eating crackers, watching the empire's reflection crack. So here is the question I want you to drop in the comments. If you'd been Ida Tarbell, holding 2 years of evidence and a personal grudge, would you have published it or sold the silence to Rockefeller for a check big enough to retire on? Tell me your price. Here is where the story flips, and you need to feel the whiplash. The public went from worship to rage. Same man, same fortune. Different decade. Enter Ida Tarbell, a journalist with a notebook and a grudge. Her exposé on Standard Oil became, no exaggeration, the most dangerous book in America. It didn't just inform, it weaponized public opinion. Suddenly, every household pulling out a kerosene receipt had a name to curse and a face to hate. And a young, hungry president named Theodore Roosevelt. He read the room. He loaded the gun. Roosevelt launched a scorched earth antitrust war. Years of court battles, subpoenas, testimony. Then came May 15th, 1911, mark that date. The Supreme Court ruled Standard Oil an unreasonable monopoly and ordered the empire dismantled. Not fined, not slapped on the wrist. Dismantled, 34 pieces, shattered like a dropped wine glass. Voil, the greatest corporate breakup in history. The headlines screamed that Rockefeller, 72 years old, was finally finished. Beaten, cornered, done. Here is what actually happened. He didn't lose a single dollar. Think about it. When you smash a trust into 34 companies, the shareholder of the trust now owns 34 companies. Rockefeller still held his stock. Same paper, new names. Names you know. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron. The fragments grew into global giants, and his slice rode each one straight to the top. Then physics did him a favor. The world stopped lighting lamps and started filling gas tanks. Kerosene out, gasoline in, demand for oil didn't shrink. It multiplied. So those 34 stocks, freed from the courtroom shadow of the Standard name, didn't dip. They exploded. By 1916, the front pages confirmed it. John D. Rockefeller had become the world's first confirmed billionaire, a literal $1 billion, while the average American was bringing home $800 a year. Run that math. His personal fortune was 1.25 million times the median annual wage. Not ideal. If you happen to be one of those workers, he had outlived his father, outlasted his competitors, outlawyered the United States government itself. But here is the twist. The bank statements couldn't fix. Money won every fight he picked, except the last one. Time. You can T-bribe time. You can T-break it into 34 pieces. The old man realized the only enemy left was the one ticking on his own pulse. So he tried to buy the next best thing, legacy. He hired the world's first professional PR men, basically inventing the modern reputation laundromat. Out went the ruthless oil baron. In came the kindly grandfather on the front lawn, handing shiny new dimes to children for the cameras. He poured fortunes into the University of Chicago. He launched the Rockefeller Foundation, funding the research that wiped out hookworm in the American South and pushed back yellow fever across continents. Real lives saved, real diseases gone. Was it guilt, a late life awakening, or just the most expensive image rebuild ever attempted? Drop your verdict in the comments. Saint, sinner, or strategist who simply played a longer game than everyone else. May 23, 1937. The machine finally powered down. John D. Rockefeller, age 97. He missed his target of hitting triple digits by 3 short years. But that other target, the one he scribbled as a teenage clerk, earning 50 cents a day, the goal of stacking $100,000 in a lifetime. He didn't just hit it, he buried it by a margin that breaks the human brain. When you try to do the math, think about what that means for your wallet right now. Adjusted for inflation, the man's peak fortune sat near $400 billion in today's money, roughly 1.5% of the entire United States economy. One human being, one checkbook, bigger than Bezos, bigger than Musk, bigger than the GDP of most countries you can name. And he started from a paycheck smaller than what you spent on coffee this week. Here is the part that should rattle you. Rockefeller didn't believe he was lucky. He believed he was assigned. In his own words, and these are his words, not mine, I believe the power to make money is a gift from God. And since I have been given it, I believe it is my duty to make money and still more money, and to use that money for the good of my fellow man, according to the dictates of my conscience. Read that again slowly, because that single sentence is the entire operating system of dynastic wealth. Earning isn't a hobby. It is a moral assignment. Spending is a sermon. Compounding is a commandment. Meanwhile, the average household runs the opposite script. Earn, swipe, repeat, paycheck in, paycheck out. No mission, no ledger, no doctrine, just vibes, and a buy now, pay later button. So here is the verdict: the con, the cartel, the kerosene, the courtroom theater, the foundations, the dimes handed to children on camera. Strip all of it away, and one mechanic remains. Money treated as duty compounds for 100 years. Money treated as decoration evaporates by Friday. You don't need 400 billion. You need the posture. Pick $1 this week and assign it a job before it assigns one to you. Automate the transfer tonight. Name the account something that scares you a little. That is the entire move. Now, tell me straight up in the comments. If a Rockefeller-sized fortune landed in your account tomorrow morning, are you building the next empire? Or are you blowing it all by Christmas? Be honest. I'm reading every reply.